I mean, I'm delighted and especially proud to be only the second Scottish author who has won. Everything's felt a little bit unreal. It's taken a moment to sink in because I've been living my entire life through a screen.
This has been in your head and on your computer screen or on the page for a long time before it really saw the light of day, before you wanted it to see the light of day. So can you take me through the process of writing it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it took about 10 years to write Shuggie from start to finish. I sat down to write it, to begin writing in 2008. And very quickly, I mean, I had some false starts, but then really quickly the book sort of was bursting to get out of me. I think I've said many times that it's fairly autobiographical, meaning I grew up in Glasgow in the 80s and I'm the queer son of a single mother who struggled with addiction my whole life and then lost her own struggle with it. And so when I sat down to write the book, there was an urgency to it for me, and it was coming out of me without me perhaps understanding what it was I was doing or what I was trying to achieve. And I actually began out of chronological order. I started on chapter 13, where the two brothers, Leek and Shuggie, are on the Sea of Slag. And then we went to chapter 22 and then chapter 4. But I didn't want to sort of get in the way of the book or stop it or trying to control it at that point. I just wanted to write. And so the first draft actually was about 900 pages single spaced, which would be a 600, actually a 1600 page book if it was ever published. And so over the 10 years, it was just a process of refining it and enriching it and rewriting about every single sentence until the book distilled into the one that's in front of you now.
It sounds like you really wanted it to be perfect. And I know probably all novelists want that, but was there a different reason for you wanting it to be perfect?
I think it's such a personal book that, first of all, I had to be happy above everybody else. And I was also loving spending time with the characters. I've lived in New York now for 20 years, even though I was born and raised in Glasgow. I was just enjoying coming to the page every single day and spending time with the characters, spending time in Glasgow, even when some of the things I was writing about were a wee bit difficult to look at or hard to think about, even as the writer, I process those feelings first before the reader gets to read it. And some days were hard to write, but I loved coming back and spending time in Glasgow. And I have a very busy job, or I had a very busy job in New York. I would start in the design studio at 8 o'clock in the morning and then go to like 10 o'clock at night. So I was always stealing snippets of time to write. I would think on the subway, I would carry a sketchbook with me. And it was that sort of power of accumulation that it took over 10 years to bring the book here.
Was it painful to write? Were there moments when you thought, actually, this particular thing did happen to me, but I have to get it out?
Yeah, it wasn't necessary. It is a work of fiction, so it wasn't necessarily that the scenes in the book ever happened, but it is that the feelings of when you love someone and they're the person you love most in the world, and you can't save them from their addiction or protect them from themselves. I write about those feelings, and I write what it meant to be a young gay boy in Glasgow in the 80s and feel very isolated because of that. And so all of the feelings and the senses come from deep inside me and my own experience. And it was hard to write sometimes. I found myself shedding a lot of tears, but I also found myself laughing, and there was a lot of things that I would remember, and I'd think, "Oh, I want to write about that." There were just the weird, odd, everyday moments of Glasgow life,
Mm.
and so the book brought me a lot of joy and a lot of happiness in that way. But men growing up on the west coast of Scotland, certainly from the working class, are never really encouraged to express themselves. We're never taught to sort of talk about our feelings or to ever let it out. We're meant to keep it inside and keep it bottled up. And so I think, especially when you're a child that goes through trauma, one of the best ways you can release that is actually to try and turn it into some kind of art. And I think in some way that's what I was trying to do.
Were you bullied when you were at school?
I was, yeah. I was bullied probably starting when I was about 6 all the way through to about 14, 15. And it was a very sort of everyday occurrence. And I think today, or I think then, some people would think it was a wee bit of banter sometimes.
Mm.
But sometimes it could be very casual. And then other times it was incredibly violent. But I was sort of looked at as different to the other boys almost at the age of 6, and I had no awareness of my own self or my own body or how I carried myself. 5 and 6 year olds are just creatures of joy that are discovering the world, and really quickly the other boys were like, why are you like that? Why are you effeminate? Why are you feminine? Why are you precocious? Why are you sensitive? And from then it just sort of snowballed, you know. House and schemes are great little petri dishes of incubation. You know, you don't really ever get off the streets that you're on. And so your reputation becomes a thing and you have to just play that role your entire childhood.
Your mother died, I think you said when you were 16.
Mhm.
And your father was not present. I think, had he died
That's
as
right.
well?
He had died, yeah, but my father left my mother when I was about 4.
Right. So when you had no parents by 16, what happened to you? Who looked after you?
Well, first of all, I had really supportive siblings, especially my older brother, really took me under his wing. When I was about 16, I also had to go into living in a bed set, actually on the south side of Glasgow. I'm from the south side. I was born and raised in Sighthill and then grew up in the East End and then the south side. I was the first person in my family to finish high school, but I came of a generation where I saw my brother, my brother-in-law, my uncle have a tough time with the trades that they put all their faith into
Mm.
because jobs were just evaporating. And so I didn't know what education was, but after my mother died, I realized that there wasn't many other options for me. So I just wanted to finish high school. And that meant I had to go sort of live in a bed sit. I worked 4 nights a week in a DIY home store, which is funny because I'm lousy at DIY. And then I worked all day Saturday and Sunday. And during the days I'd go to school, and at night I would work in this shop, and then on the weekends. And I just wanted to get this education, this school education. It was an interesting time because it was also an incredibly freeing time as well. I think after living with my mother all that time and her addiction, I don't mean this to be a sad thing to say or a callous thing to say, but when you love someone that deeply and then they're at peace, you also have a sense of peace, although you also have a sense of loss. And so it was the first time in my life I could focus on my education and almost on myself.
Mm.
And that's when I came to books, but I came to books too late to follow that as a career.
Who would you say this book is for? I was really touched by the book, and that was not my childhood, but maybe it's just because it was Glasgow at time that I recognise that connected me to it. But on your timeline on Twitter, you have a 23-year-old bookworm from Wisconsin called Donovan Taylor, who
Mm,
posted on Twitter, the ending of this novel was like watching a pair of doves fly into a cerulean sky. I absolutely loved Shuggie Bain. That to me was
mm,
mind blowing because a
mm.
23-year-old from Wisconsin, how is someone like that able to connect so deeply with a geography that's so different to his and a language that's so different?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think actually that was Shuggie's stumbling block on the road to publication. Because I think a lot of people, a lot of publishers, I think I've told you now that 30 American publishers turned it down and didn't think that this thing that was so specific in geography and language would be able to resonate with people around the world. But the central theme of Shuggie is love, and it's about hope, and it's about loss, and it's about empathy. And those are universal things. It doesn't matter where a book is set or the people that you're looking at. I think if you can convince the reader to care for the characters, then you've succeeded as a writer. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. I wanted it to be such an immersive novel that no matter where you were in the world, you could sit in that front room with Agnes, or you could be on that playground with Shuggie, and you could understand what those feelings were. And I've been really impressed with the amount of empathy that readers have brought to the book. It's been really touching.
Now, I just very recently wrote about going back home, wanting to go back home. I left Glasgow 20 years ago as well. And I wonder, I don't know if it's a 20-year itch, middle age, whether it's coronavirus, I don't know. Am I right in thinking that you are thinking the same way?
Yeah, I totally am. I come home twice a year, 2, 3 times a year anyway. All my family's on the south side. But I'm always a part of writing Shuggie is about trying to bring myself home,
Mm.
at least bring my soul home and my thoughts and my heart home, until my body can follow and I can find work and I can move back to Glasgow. But I'm always looking for ways to come home and be in the city I love. I think growing up in a city that can be as empathetic and energetic and also sometimes maddening as Glasgow can be,
Mm.
really gets under your skin. It's hard to shake. And even out here in New York, I'm always thinking and inspired by the city.
When you've come back to Glasgow, and the answer to this is probably quite obvious, but do you go back to the places of your childhood? I know that your school, you wrote about that, that doesn't exist anymore. It's a
Mm.
bit like my school, actually. My school was demolished as well, so it doesn't even exist.
Mm.
So there's the school, or perhaps where the school was, where you used to live. Do you ever have you been back there to look and to feel?
All the time, yeah, my family are still where I grew up, and so we're not so far away, we haven't moved that far, it's only me that's really come away, Asmere. And so I'm always back. I was keeping my eye on the gentrification or the rejuvenation of Sight Hill, and I'm always sort of like sniffing around. And in writing the book, I did want to sort of go back and travel and see what had changed and what hadn't. And it's been a really sort of healing journey for me as well, just to reconnect with all of that.